Okay. Hi there. Welcome back to Sparks of Marketing podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. I am here with two guests. I'm very excited, Stefanie Pesis Weil and Ilissa Berz. And they both have a new venture, a new business supporting nonprofits that they are brave enough to have started around the time that we all entered into this quarantine lockdown COVID-19. So I want to talk to them about how they are continuing to serve their market and support nonprofits in this crazy time when they need to be raising a lot of money. Okay, so welcome, Stefanie and Ilissa. I'm really excited to be interviewing two people at once, but together. And so can you tell me first a little bit about yourself and your business that you guys have just launched?
Sure. So my name is Stefanie Pesis Weil. We launched Empowered Nonprofits at the beginning of June. And right in the midst of this incredibly crazy time, as you just said, I live in Highland Park. I have 3 kids. And so I'm also working at home right now during COVID with 3 children that are learning from home. So that is a crazy adventure. I have my master's in social work and a certificate in Jewish communal service and Judaic studies from the University of Michigan. And so I was trained to work in the nonprofit world and nonprofit management.
Okay. And tell me about the business that you just started. What's it called, and what's your
So Ilissa and I launched Empowered Nonprofits in June. We had both come out of another consulting firm where I was one of the co-owners and co-founders, and we were looking to start something a little smaller, a little more boutique in nature. And one of our large focuses right now is on virtual events. And Ilissa and I both have an extensive background in events in general, and especially during COVID. Once it started in March, a lot of our clients started transitioning to virtual events. And so we decided to make that, for right now, a primary focus of our events, although of our services, although we will also be offering other services like general campaign assessment, plan creation, and implementation of plans. But for right now, during this time, we've been spending a lot of time on virtual events, which we'll talk a lot about today.
Right. Sounds good. Okay. So I'm sure there's so many people that are just having to figure that out right now. So Ilissa, tell me just really quickly a little bit about you and what you're doing with Empower Nonprofits, and then we'll jump into how you guys moved right into events.
Sure. So I am Ilissa Berz. Like Stefanie said, we started Empowered Nonprofits in June. And we both worked together previously for 5 years together. Stefanie much longer than I there, but 5 years together at another nonprofit consulting firm where, as she mentioned, we did have our hands in a lot of different types of work with nonprofits. And eventually my portfolio shifted really to managing mostly events. So this was kind of a really nice natural progression / transition into, continuing that, and also really kind of learning a whole new unexpected skill set when this happened.
Right. So when you guys had to plan to start Empowered Nonprofits, was events going to be the main element that you guys are helping nonprofits with?
I think that most clients right now, they may have been focused on other areas, but because it's very hard for them to interact with their donors in ways that they were used to doing, so in-person one-on-one solicitations, or everybody going into the office and donors coming in and experience organization is providing, if it's a school, if it's a camp, if it's some sort of health-related organization, there's normally an opportunity to interact in person with that organization. But when the shift in March really, came to all things virtual, right? Meetings were virtual, school became virtual, shopping became virtual. It just really became the natural progression for nonprofits and where they were willing to spend money mainly as well.
Right.
So a lot of our clients, just naturally, we were working with them on events at that time. So we were able to shift. But a lot of what we're seeing right now is organizations figuring out how to interact with their donor base of support, their board members, in a way that's meaningful and where they can see them and where there can be some sort of virtual experience to maintain that connection with them.
Uh-huh.
And so I think just to add on to that, there's like a wide range of what events can be or mean depending on what organization it is, right? So I know we're focusing on like what you typically think of as a gala and transitioning that online. But, depending on what the organization has done previously or what their donor base of support is used to, that could mean just like getting their top donors together online and like hosting what would typically be an appreciation event or getting people together in a parlor meeting sort of way online. So I think it can take shape in many different ways. And just because we're focusing on one of them doesn't mean there's a lot of other options for what works for you, which is something, we definitely want to talk about is making these work for you.
Right. Okay. And how much did you guys know about creating a virtual event or adding virtual elements to an event when you first got started?
So I'm gonna start with the second half of that question.
Okay.
So virtual elements, that's not something that I personally would say is anything new per se. Like,
Right.
Most of the events we've done have some sort of like video component, musical components, performance component, things like that, where we were never calling them virtual, but those are really pieces
Digital.
that have, transition. So, there's often times a slideshow or some sort of like visual background playing. So all of those components we have been using in these virtual galas, I will say. So while maybe not like what you typically thought of them initially, those are definitely things that have, worked their way in really seamlessly.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I would imagine in this really short time that you guys have had to learn a ton and become among the most knowledgeable people. Like most people, if they've done anything, maybe they've had to do one for themselves. So what's that learning process been like? And what are some tips and things that you've learned that you think could help people?
Alyssa's going to get into the tips, but I'll take the first part of that question. It was a learning curve for us. There is no doubt about it. I mean, when we first started, when COVID hit in March, we had clients call and say, "What's this virtual event thing?" And we were like, "Yeah, most people have never done one before."
Right.
That wasn't really part of the fundraising lingo. Or nonprofit lingo, the virtual event. So, I mean, there were dinnerless dinners where, organizations would send an invitation in the mail and people would still sponsor in a regular way and they would quote unquote purchase a table. And then there wouldn't be an event.
I love those events, by the way.
Ironically, they don't really work very well for organizations. So what we have found, even with the dinnerless dinners, is that people do want to interact with organizations. They want to have ways to see what's going on, to experience the organization, to have their heartstrings, pulled. And so even the dinnerless dinners were not typically. Maybe an organization would do it for 1 or 2 years, and then they would find that it wasn't raising the amount of money that they were seeing from the in-person events. I'm sure their expenses were down, which is also what we're seeing in the virtual arena, is that you don't have the cost of a meal, you don't have the cost of a location. There are definitely incredible savings that organizations are having as a result of, going to the virtual experience. But there was a huge learning curve for us, and we had to watch lots of them. A virtual event that occurred in March is completely different than the virtual event that is happening in August right now. And then probably what we'll see over the course of the next few months, they're much more technologically savvy. The platforms are evolving with the events. Fundraising platforms are evolving. Action, services, online services that literally during the course of us planning an event have offered new services midstream because they hearing from organizations that, wow, why don't you have this? Or this is going to make our event that much easier. So it's really been a learning process for all of us along the way. I think that something that Empower does and that Ilissa and our team that we do really well is that we evolve with our teams. So we're on the cutting edge. We're always researching. We're always watching other virtual galas, and we're seeing what's out there so that we can bring that knowledge base to our clients. And we also really listen to our clients. So we have them watch the virtual galas that we're doing for our other clients. And we say, what did you like about that? What didn't you like about that? And then they come to us with their own vision of what would make sense for their organization. Some organizations love the talking heads on the screen. Some organizations don't like that at all, and they want their story being told through more of a documentary type of medium. So it's really our job to listen to them and then help make that happen for them. And now I'm going to hand it over to Ilissa because she's going to talk about some of the tips and tricks of the trade that we've been incorporating into our events.
Okay. All right. Hit it, Ilissa.
Yeah. I think the first thing that I would really convey is you don't know what you don't know, right? And this is new to everybody. So we have really been, as the times have kind of shifted, like Stefanie said, an event now is very different than these events that were happening in March. At the beginning, we were really partnering with clients in a way that was let's figure this out together. And now we've really evolved from that. And we have it, I would say, a little more figured out now that we have a number of these under our belt that we have done. So, organizations can't be afraid to ask for help in this way, just because you are a master at planning your in-person gala every year. This does not translate,
right?
Verbatim. And I had said to, I don't remember someone that we have events that we do where I can literally walk through their events in my sleep minute to minute. And if you try to put that online for somebody, it's just not going to work. So you really need to consult with people to think outside of the box, whether that be a consultant who is doing a number of these. We, of course, recommend event leadership, whether that is your board only, or if you choose to have a committee focused on the event, like many organizations usually do. But, those are people who are likely also attending other virtual galas because of their friends or whatever else. And they, a lot of the good feedback that we've received or good ideas that we've received have really come from board members who have seen things done a certain way in other events. So really, just kind of embracing this is new. You don't know what you don't know. And engage the people who can help you and who will be able to not necessarily make it easier, but make it more tailored to you,
Right.
your organization.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are we going to go on?
No, go ahead.
I would guess that of the organizations that you're working with, the ones that had a strong online digital marketing presence and were already connected to their audience are the ones that are better positioned to be helping now. So is that what you've seen? And can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, 100%. That is what we have seen. There's been varying feedback in terms of, just to go back to your point about digital marketing, there's been varying degrees of feedback from people like, I'm getting so many emails, or I can't get enough emails. But I think that depends on what your online presence was before, but especially leading up to a virtual gala, like you can't send too many reminders. It's like, sending for an in-person gala, like telling people turn-by-turn directions and where you're going to park and like all of those things that people need to know.
Right.
And it's so easy for people to like misplace an email that has a link or a time or where they need to go to donate. So definitely communicating has been really beneficial. And, to your point about people who are engaged more, kind of, they're just used to that. Like, the events that we're doing virtually right now, they are organizations that have these events annually. So people aren't surprised when they see that they're hosting a virtual event.
Right.
Because for most organizations, if you're hosting a big gala, it's because that is the majority of your fundraising revenue for the year. So no one, if you know the organization, is shocked that this is happening, because just because of everything going on doesn't mean there isn't still that need to continue the work and raise the money. And this is really, still, again, depending on your organization, the best way to do that.
Right.
And to piggyback on that, Wendy, what we are seeing is that, if an organization didn't have a Facebook presence, or if they didn't have, if they weren't using glass in a way, or they didn't have a look and feel to their organization that people could recognize when it came to them, that those organizations, it's really hard to start building that right now during a pandemic, where there's a lot of noise coming from many different avenues in your life, right? So I do think that the organizations that already had a well-developed Facebook presence, and on top of what Ilissa is saying, I think that organizations that already had some sort of an event, the transition into a virtual event was much easier. It's even that much easier if they had a social media presence where people were following them and where they were already interacting with them in a certain way. We have a client that has a virtual event in September, and they have a very strong Facebook presence, and we're going to be running a contest as a part of the virtual event. And if they didn't have that social media presence, that would not have been something that we could have embarked on, for that specific event. So I do think that, all of these things are layered, right? If you have to have a foundation in order to really adjust. And so, with other organizations that may not have had some of the foundations that we are talking about right now, you're really going to have to spend time during this period building that up, just like you would if you were implementing an annual campaign from scratch and you didn't really have a strategic plan, a year-round strategic plan. So it has to be very thoughtful.
Right. And then would you say that having these events is then continuing to build those audiences?
Well,
so
I think
like new leads and new prospects.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially because a lot of these events are, really location based. So we had a client that is a national organization that had regional offices, and they all ran their own galas. So they had multiple expenses for different regions. And this way, they all came together. A number of their regions came together to host a virtual gala. Therefore, they had many more opportunities to blast this out to individuals that lived all around the United States and Canada,
Right.
to have a more to have more exposure and presence on their gala. So it really is an opportunity for organizations that do that are, their events are more geographically limited, to opening that up. And I do think that organizations they need to connect with their donors. They need to let them know that they are going to survive during this period of time. Donors want to give their money to organizations that have a plan, that are actively engaging with them, that look like they're continuing their success rate, and that their services are continuing to be offered, even during a time that's extremely challenging, even if that means that they have to scale their services back, because we're all having to do that right now. For an organization, if they want to come out of this on the other side, they have to maintain their relevance. Right. And so by putting those messages out there, it doesn't have to be a 3 to 4 hour experience like an in-person gala was. It could be just 30 to 45 minutes.
Right.
But if it's 30 to 45 minutes of meaningful, engaging material, those donors are going to continue to come back.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that the virtual element will carry into the real-time in-person space once we're all able to get back together? Do you think that the future of event fundraising is going to look different?
I do. I definitely think I'll phrase it this way. I don't think in-person gatherings are going to go anywhere, but I also don't think these are either.
Right.
Because people really, when you're at a large fundraising gala, you see people who haven't seen each other in a while. They're interacting. There's a lot, of social interaction that goes along with not only being there to support the organization, but people who just, maybe see each other once or twice a year, haven't talked in a while. It's a good way for board members to interact with donors. So I don't necessarily think those are going anywhere, but I do think these virtual galas provide a really unique new opportunity and perspective that is really beneficial, whether or not it's used in a fundraising capacity per se as heavily as it is being used right now, or maybe it's like an add-on to your gala, your in-person gala, to engage those people from around the country or whatever their circumstances are that preclude them from attending in person. I definitely think they're still going to be used, even if, things go back to quote unquote normal and in person.
Okay, that's great. So we kind of covered this, but just to make it really clear before we go. So in terms of what you would say for an organization that has, maybe like a fall or an end of year event coming, and it's most likely not going to be in person. So what are like the practical steps that you would recommend they take? Like start now, and then if they want more support, how can they find you?
Well, what we would really recommend is, like for any event, that you start planning well in advance. Like a 6 to 8 month runway leading up to any event. So the first thing to do is really look at your past contracts for an in-person event, whether that be a hotel or some sort of restaurant. Take a look at some of your other service providers. Make sure that those contracts, can be moved a year later. A lot of places are being extremely flexible with that, but also make sure that your board and that your leadership is ready to go to support this process. We are finding that you really need to raise about 80 to 90% of your funds leading into an event. And that is really all hands on deck. We don't really find that night of fundraising is as successful as it is when you have an in-person event. We're really recommending that organizations give themselves enough of a runway to raise funds, and the virtual galas, the filming, the editing, all of those pieces that go into your program takes a decent amount of time.
Right.
Have a minimum of 3 months, where you're gathering your content, you're deciding what your story is, you're putting that all together. Most likely you're going to be working with some sort of production events manager that's going to help you with the night of, because you don't want to have issues like streaming and people cutting out. And so it's really important that you're thinking through all of those things. And that's really what we're here for, whether you're doing an in-person event or whether you're doing a virtual event. There are just tricks of the trade, and there are best practices that will help, that will allow you to have the most successful event possible. And so that's really what we're here for.
Right. Oh, that's great. So Ilissa, how do people find you?
How do people find us? Well, they can go to empowerednonprofits.com. We are on Facebook, Empowered Nonprofits. We are on Instagram, Empowered NP. You can email us, Stefanie, and do you want me to spell?
I'll put it in the show
You'll
notes.
put it all in. Great.
Yeah.
Stefanie at Empowered Nonprofits, Ilissa at Empowered Nonprofits. We are always happy to respond to you. And we, recently launched, as we talked about. So we officially started in June. We officially did like our broad-based social media and e-blast big launch to the community in July. And we're definitely going to be doing many more of those communications. And we have some exciting stuff coming up for virtual events. So, for anyone that wants to keep updated, send us an email. Like you said, you'll put those in there and we can add you to our list. We're happy to answer any questions anyone has. So we will make ourselves very available to talk to you and make sure you feel good about what you're trying to do.
Okay, that's great. Well, Stefanie, is there anything you want to add before we jump off?
No, thank you so much for having us. It's a challenging time, but it's also an exciting time. And it's really an opportunity for organizations to take a really good, solid look at how they're doing things. I feel like there's a lot of evaluation in many aspects of our life right now. We're all doing a lot of personal introspection, professional introspection. It's also a really wonderful time for organizations to take a look at how they're raising money, how they're engaging their donor base of support. And so I do think that while this is a very challenging time, I think it's also an opportunity for organizations to figure out how they're going to move forward into 2021.
For sure. Well, thank you so much. I just met Ilissa, but Stefanie I've known for a lot of my career, so I have no doubt that you guys will be successful in spite of the crazy times that you are launching a business in. But I know that many nonprofits are depending on you guys to succeed so that they can continue to succeed. So thank you for all the good you're doing, and thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today.
Thank you for having us. Super appreciate it.
Okay, I'll see you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.